Welcome to 28storms.com. This is a brief tropical weather update on this Tuesday, September 20th. We have two tropical disturbances in the deep tropics this afternoon, and we have been talking about both of these for quite some time now. 98L Invest continues to organize in the central Atlantic. The Hurricane Center is giving this now a 70% chance of developing into the next depression of the season, and this very well could go on to become Tropical Storm Ophelia. Here is just a quick look at the latest tropical model spaghetti plots, and interests in the Leeward Islands are advised to monitor the storm's progress. In the eastern Pacific, we also have this developing tropical disturbance near the Gulf of Tehuantepec. This also is now being given a 70% chance of development within the next 48 hours, and this storm will likely be named Tropical Storm Hillary over the next 48 to 72 hours, but thankfully, based on the latest model guidance, it should remain to the south and west of Mexico. Turning first toward 98L Invest on the latest visible animation, we see that the storm is definitely getting its act together. It's slowly but surely organizing. However, the broad area of low pressure is still rather expansive from southwest to northeast, and it's probably going to take an additional 12 to 24 hours to develop a well-defined surface circulation. And also on the latest infrared, we see that the convection is not quite explosive just yet, but this is subject to change very quickly. And the latest water vapor image would suggest that conditions are marginally favorable for slow development. If anything, we do have some slight southwest wind shear, and that's probably going to keep a lid on this storm's potential, but it should have no trouble becoming the next depression and more than likely Tropical Storm Ophelia over the next 2 to 3 days. However, this upper level trough to the system's north is expected to continue being somewhat of a detrimental factor, as it's going to amplify and continue retrograding toward the west throughout the forecast period. The latest low to mid-level steering continues to indicate that 98L Invest will continue to move just north of due west and more than likely end up directly over the Leeward Islands as a tropical depression or tropical storm, and thereafter we will begin to see more troughing into the western Atlantic, and that's going to allow this developing system to eventually recurve to the east of the United States. The latest wind shear analysis from the SIMS website is quite clearly showing the 35 to 50 knots of vertical wind shear just to the system's north, and once again this trough will continue retrograding toward the west, and I expect this to become an increasing problem as this begins to near the Caribbean, and it more than likely will result in the system's eventual dissipation. To the contrary, the tropical disturbance over the Gulf of Tehuantepec is expected to continue moving in an overall westerly direction, and notice that the upper level conditions out ahead of this system are very favorable, so we more than likely will be dealing with not only Tropical Storm Hillary, but Hillary should also eventually become the next hurricane of the eastern Pacific season. If we take a more detailed look at the tropical disturbance in the eastern Pacific, we see that it still continues to be rather elongated from west to east, and you can see that fairly well by the expansive convection, but we do appear to have a developing low-level circulation just to the south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, and convection does appear to be ever so gradually organizing closer to this potential center. And once again, based on the wind shear analysis maps, in addition to the latest water vapor animation, conditions do appear favorable for this system to steadily intensify. Turning to the latest 12Z model guidance, starting off with the 12Z Canadian CMC model, we see that it quite clearly develops the tropical disturbance in the eastern Pacific into a rather robust hurricane, especially by day 6. If we start the animation over again, also notice that 98L Invest is expected to develop into the next tropical storm. In fact, the CMC appears to be overdeveloping this system just a little bit, and that very well could be the reason why this model is taking the track a little bit to the north of the Leeward Islands. I do not think that this track is going to verify. It's going to be a little bit more toward the south and west initially, so I am expecting direct impacts over the northeast Caribbean. And finally, it's also keeping the eastern Atlantic somewhat active with another potential system out here to the east of 40 degrees west by day 6. The 12Z run of the GFS model appears to be a little bit more realistic with the evolution of 98L Invest. It does show some slight intensification, but not quite as much as the CMC is indicating, and therefore it's showing a little bit more of a westerly track in the short term, although those impacts are expected to be fairly marginal. And here we are by day 7 with a hurricane to the southwest of the Baja Peninsula continuing to move west-northwest away from land, and that is certainly good news. And in the meantime, the rest of the Atlantic Basin is forecast to be quiet. And finally, switching over to the 12Z run of the ECMWF, by 24 hours we definitely have a tropical cyclone just to the south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec. By 48 hours, Invest 98L is continuing to move west-northwest just to the south of this strong subtropical ridge, and it is intensifying just a little bit. We also see continued intensification from this tropical system in the eastern Pacific, and if we advance this into days 3, 4, and 5, notice that Tropical Storm Hillary, and eventually soon to be Hurricane Hillary, has safely passed to the west and south of Mexico, and also our future Tropical Storm Ophelia, in all likelihood, is beginning to encounter some volatile wind conditions in the mid to upper levels, so therefore this model is showing a little bit weakening. So even if the center does pass directly over the Leeward Islands, the impacts should remain marginal, and the good news continues with the developing upper level cutoff low that all of the models are indicating here over much of the eastern United States throughout the extended range. This would guarantee that 98L, no matter what its intensity, will eventually pose no threat to the United States and will more than likely recurve, whether it be a tropical wave or even if it maintained itself as a weak tropical cyclone. So the tropics are somewhat active on this Tuesday afternoon, but the good news is that the landfall threats are fairly marginal in nature. So overall, things are looking good out there in the tropics, but stay tuned to 28storms.com throughout the remainder of the week.